have been getting absolutely blown up in the comments on Instagram and YouTube with people requesting a build breakdown of the WRX. People have a lot of questions about what wide body it is, what headlights they are, what's done to the engine, and we're gonna cover all of that today. So we are going to be going over the exterior modifications, interior modifications, and drivetrain. I'm gonna link those times below in the description, so if you're only interested in one or the other, you can just skip ahead. So let's get into this. We're gonna start with the engine. Let's get this hood popped. In the engine bay, we've got an EJ20G, which is the Japanese STI 2-liter. What makes this EJ20 so special is that from the factory it came with a closed deck, which has thicker cylinder walls so that it can hold higher pressures and more stress. It also comes with oil squirters, which are these little nozzles that squirt oil at the back of the piston rings from the inside near the crank and lubricate your cylinder walls in order to help with lubrication and any ring damaging the cylinder walls. In the bottom end, or the short block, I've got Wiseco forged pistons, scat rods, and ACL race bearings with an OEM crank. This can handle about 500 wheel horsepower and is currently tuned to make 340 wheel right now because we're running pump gas. The heads are the USDM 2.0 liter WRX heads with BC 272 cams, Ferrea valves. The exhausts are actually Inconel exhaust valves because I've always wanted to run anti-lag, like rally style anti-lag. And your exhaust valves can see really high temperatures, and the Inconel can hold up to that. I've got Roger Clark adjustable cam gears. Now, as far as the fuel system, these are APS fuel rails. You can't buy these in the US anymore. And we've got Injector Dynamics 1000cc top feed fuel injectors and a Walbro 225 fuel pump in the back, which is adequate for what we're running right now, but hopefully in the future, here pretty soon, we can upgrade that, run flex fuel, and get closer to those high 400 numbers. For the turbo system, if you could see underneath, I also am running an APS equal length exhaust manifold, a custom up pipe that I built to come up to a rotated turbo setup with a Precision 5858 turbo. A couple very unique things you're going to see in my engine bay, other than it being kind of messy because I did it all myself, is the rotated intake manifold. Literally on the EJ engine, it's symmetrical. You can just rotate this around and face it forward. But in doing so, you're going to have to make a lot of modifications. I chose to go with a WRC style front intercooler. So if you look down here, that's actually the radiator. If you look up here, that's the intercooler running across the top grill. Now, the reason I built it this way is because obviously my car is WRC inspired, but the idea behind it is by keeping it up higher off the ground, you're going to get less damage from rocks, and you should also be getting cooler air by not being close to like hot pavement. But the main reason I did it is because of shorter intercooler piping. If you've seen non-rotated setups, you'll usually have a big long intercooler pipe coming around like this and then to the turbo. It's literally going down through, clear down here, and then up. With having a 2-liter engine, it's super important to make everything as efficient as possible and to minimize turbo lag and other draws on engine power. So what you'll see here is it comes right out of the turbo, makes a turn. It goes the shortest route possible through our intercooler. Again, shortest route possible, past the tile blow-off valve, and then into the rotated manifold. As far as boost control, what you're going to notice is that there's no mass airflow sensor anymore. We could take this off and just run an open turbo if we wanted to, where usually you'd have a mass airflow on your stock intake box. We are running a Cobb 4-bar map sensor, a tile blow-off valve, and a 3-port boost control solenoid with a tile external wastegate. Now what you're going to hear in a lot of our videos is a combination of a big turbo, whistling, equal length headers, and an external wastegate that just dumps straight to the ground, if you can see it right there. So it's super loud, screams like a jet engine. Another thing that's really cool about the engine setup and tuning with a MAP sensor versus a MAF sensor is that if any of your intercooler piping pops off or you get a massive boost leak, you're metering your air from your manifold back. By combining information from your air intake temp sensor and a MAP sensor, if you have a leak, it's not going to damage your engine. Where if you had a MAF sensor, like most cars do from the factory, or at least the WRX, if you lose air after it's measured by your MAF sensor, you're going to damage your engine and have issues. In the near future, a few things that I would like to improve about my setup is a Chase Bays power steering relocation setup. I've kind of built one myself, but it's just kind of ghetto. I'd like to fix that. Also, I'd like to upgrade the fuel pump in the tank and get a flex fuel tune and get rid of the Cobb access port and run a Link ECU, which will give us a lot of fail-safe features and the capability to do all different types of anti-lag, launch control, shoot crazy flames, basically be a full-blown rally car at that point as far as tuning capabilities. As far as your suspension is concerned, I didn't mention this in the beginning, but we are going to cover that. It's an important item. And it doesn't quite follow under drivetrain or fall under, exterior. It's a chassis modification or suspension modification. So we've got the BC DR extreme low coilovers. That's how we're able to get this fitment and ride. I'm super impressed with them. I love the way they handle so far. They're way better than my BC BR coilovers, or the entry-level lowest end BC coilovers. Huge shout out to Rally Sport for helping us get these coilovers for the car. Soon we'll be installing a white line front and rear sway bar with white line end links and rear sway bar mounts. Another thing you'll notice in the engine bay is that the alternator is sitting over here. Usually the alternator is flipped and sitting right here from the factory. I've modified this bracket and made it so that you could just flip the alternator over, adjust the tension on the belt with this bracket and this bolt by moving the alternator up and down. Now the reason for this was to get the short intercooler piping with the reverse intake manifold. So it's pretty interesting. The intercooler piping runs through the belt in order to make the angle. And there's no AC compressor here. So we accomplish a couple things with this setup. Shorter piping and less draw on the engine by not having an AC compressor. Have you ever been driving your car and you turn the AC on, you feel it bog down a little bit and you lose a little bit of power? So effectively, by removing the AC system, you get rid of a ton of weight and you get rid of that draw on the engine. As far as the rest of the drivetrain outside of the engine basics, we've got a Japanese 6-speed transmission. So it has a really short, quick gear ratio, which is a blast to drive with a bigger turbo because you get into boost really fast. There's still turbo lag. This is a big turbo for a 2-liter and running 91. So it spools a little faster when we're running E85. But the transmission really helps it so that you can always be in the right gear to stay in boost. From the transmission back, we have a limited slip rear differential. Up front, we've got a Brembo big brake kit, if you can see it in there. In the near future, I'd like to add the rear Brembo brakes and a hydraulic handbrake. I really like the Chase Bay's handbrake I've seen. Looks simple, and I'd like to hook that up with our DCCD Pro center diff controller so that when you lock up the rear tires, it opens up the center diff and you're not causing any damage. The DCCD Pro already has that integrated for the stock handbrake, so it should be pretty easy to wire the switch up to a hydraulic handbrake when we get there. Now that we have covered the engine, the drivetrain, and the suspension modifications, let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. I answer them all personally. We're going to dive into the exterior modifications. The first item that people always notice about my exterior is the headlights. These are a replica of the dry carbon Pro Drive WRC headlights that I would be surprised if you can find anywhere today. These were used on WRC cars from 2002 to 2003. When I found a set of these housings in about 2009, just the dry carbon housing was $2,000 without any electronics, projectors, anything like that. I can't even find those for sale anymore. I built these off of parts from what I found on eBay. So I found a light that had this housing. It had like a weird lens right here and a bulb in here, you can see. What I did was I took this completely apart, removed the lenses, filled some holes and some weird things that were going on with the mold for what I wanted to create. I vinyl wrapped it. I did a bunch of rewiring to remove like a bulb blinker that was in here and install these small LEDs. The projectors are not my favorite, so hopefully in the future I can switch these out to like an LED that will just fit right in here perfectly as well. In the front here, we have an OEM WRX bumper with fog light covers and a replica Pro Drive front lip. Up top, we have a Japanese STI hood scoop. You'll notice it's a little bit taller, but it retains the same shape as the 02, 03 body STIs and WRXs. Got the Aero Catch hood latches, which I used to hate, but I honestly like the way they look a lot now with the color scheme and the small accents of black we've got going on. As far as the wide body, we've got a combination of a couple different kits here. The front are a full fender from a company in the UK called HTA or HT Auto. The rear are actually over fenders that I got from eBay, and basically what we did is cut out the regular stock fenders back here and then used adhesive to attach them to the body and to the door. And the reason that they look molded is because of the vinyl wrap. There is actually a seam right here. The vinyl wrap is gloss carmine red from Avery Dennison. It's not perfect. I installed it myself. There's a few flaws, but being the first car I wrapped, I'm pretty happy with it so far, and it's held up for the past few months, all right? Back here, you can see one thing that stands out is our spoiler. This is an S7 WRC replica spoiler. Now, before you say, oh, you should have got the real WRC one with the slats, you're wrong. That was not on the 2002-2003 WRC car. That came on the 04 through 07 WRC cars. This is a different wing entirely. What you'll notice is it hangs off the back of the trunk and looks way more aggressive. It's a little bit lower, hangs off, has a little kick on the bottom wing and a kick on the top wing, and is one of my favorite parts. We got this from RPG, Racing Products Group. They're one of the sponsors for the project. I'll link them below. Back here you can get a little look at the exhaust. This is the NVIDIA N1 Racing exhaust. It sounds amazing, has a little burnt titanium tip. Rally Sport hooked us up with that. Thank you for sponsoring our project. I'll also link them below to check it out. The next thing we get a ton of questions about are the wheels. These are wheels by 1552. Same brand you'll see on like all of Ken Block's cars, and they're amazing. I'm really happy with these wheels. They're a motorsports inspired wheel company, and if you are a big rally fan, you'll probably recognize these from the Lancia Delta Integrale. These are the Integrale wheels. They are a 17 by 7.5 with a plus 30 offset. I'm running an 1.5 inch spacer to bump them out because our wide body is so much wider than the factory. If the car was a factory body still, this offset and this wheel would fit perfectly with it. And I love the way it turned out personally. Now, I know a lot of you stance boys are gonna scoff at those wheel specs, but this isn't a stance car. I used to have 18 by 10 inch wheels on this car that would come out flush with the wide body. But having that big of a wheel that's super heavy and having tires that are that wide with a big old contact patch isn't what this drivetrain is built for. So I was breaking rear axles and overall just putting more shock load on the drivetrain than I needed to. And it was going to be more expensive to do the type of driving I want to do with this car with expensive wide tires on it. In the near future we'll be doing an episode on it, but we are installing some dry carbon WRC mirrors that are going to look pretty rad with this car and keep with the theme of an authentic looking 2002 to 2003 WRC style build. I don't think there could have been a better combination of wing, wide body, color, and wheels for our WRC inspired build. Now that we have covered all of the exterior modifications, again, drop any comments below if you have any questions. I'll answer them all. We're gonna jump into the interior modifications and show you what we've done there. Okay, in the interior, what you're going to notice first off is the Sparco steering wheel. Everyone thinks this is NOS. Like, I know we've all seen Fast and Furious, but on most cars, the buttons are horns, not nitrous oxide systems. With the Sparco steering wheel, we have an NRG quick release hub, Sparco circuit racing seats with 3-inch Takata harnesses. The seats are extremely deep. They hug you and hold you super tight, and both of these are two of my favorite mods of the car because you're able to feel exactly what's happening. With a smaller steering wheel, you have a better driver's feel and a little bit quicker response, and being in such tight bucket seats that are lower to the ground, you can feel everything that's happening with the front of the car, the rear of the car, and you're able to have a better experience driving it, and you're able to drive it harder and closer to its limits because you can feel exactly what the car's doing rather than like sloshing around in the seats. On the inside, I've kept it super simple. You can see all we have here is our wideband air-fuel ratio gauge and our access port. These don't work anymore because all of the AC and heat components have been completely gutted out of the dash in order to save weight. I wanted the interior to be very simple. When you're driving hard, you don't have a lot of time to look at gauges, and I think that as long as your car is maintained well and you take care of any issues that it might have and you tune it well, you shouldn't have to look at most gauges. You know, you can watch your temperature gauge and your check engine light, and if everything's programmed right, you should be okay. Once we get the new standalone ECU, we'll have more fail-safe features, and I'll feel a lot better about that because it can go into limp mode if you are experiencing any issues with your engine, rather than trying to watch a bunch of gauges up a gauge pod or something like that. Up here, it's pretty civilized. You've got power windows, power locks, door cards, and almost a full interior. But what has taken the most work and where I've put the most effort is in weight removal. So if you look under these mats, this color is where sound deadening material used to be. And it's a thick material like this that is made to dampen all the sound that comes off of the road. So all the rocks flipping up, the exhaust drone, just chassis squeaks and things like that. What you do to remove this is pretty interesting, and we could do another video on it if you guys are interested. Let me know in the comments below. But this stuff is glued on there, super hard to get off. And there's a really interesting trick on how you do it. You put dry ice on it, and the dry ice makes it really brittle while it's frozen, and you chip it out. All right, let's cruise to the back, show you some more weight removal. As you can see, the back is completely gutted from the trunk to the firewall. One of the areas where we shaved a ton of weight was in the rear doors. The windows are now fixed in place. They don't roll up and down in the rear. They still do in the front. But what I did was I took a grinder and I cut out the entire inner frame. I also removed the motor for the rear windows, the electronics, and everything that I could to remove as much weight as possible. I could still cut out this inner door bar. This is a safety feature that I really don't need anymore if someone's sitting back there. Could probably lose a couple pounds that way. I'd like to get a full-size matching spare of the Integrale wheels to strap down back here like in the WRC cars with a tie down, and ultimately a full cage for the car. I know it'll add a little weight and I'm a little bit bummed about that, but I would like to get one. You can also see back here the rear strut tower bar. There's a front one as well for chassis rigidity and improving the handling characteristics. Weight removal has been a huge part of this project. If you watch our last episode, we took it to the dump and weighed it on a scale, and we removed around 200 pounds from the chassis. A lot of you are going to say that's not a lot of weight, but this car came from the factory at right about 3,000 and I think 50 pounds. We're at 2,860 now. 3,000 pounds is really light for a four-door all-wheel drive chassis, so to shave another 200 pounds off of it is really good. One of the ways that this chassis is so light from the factory is an aluminum hood. There's special things like that that Subaru did to save a lot of weight versus just running a steel hood. One thing I would love to do to remove some weight is up high, getting a carbon roof. Because by removing weight up high, it lowers your center of gravity and affects the handling characteristics as well as the performance. All right, that's it for today's build breakdown on the WRX. There's a lot to cover, so if I missed something or you have any questions, drop a comment below. I'll personally reply to each comment and answer any questions that you have. Thanks for tuning in today. If you've enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button, help us grow this channel and community so we can keep creating more content that you like with our cars. Thanks guys.